Hey there Cosmic Warriors, and welcome back to another video. Okay, so in today's video we are going to be taking a look at the differences between the Capricorn Sun, the Capricorn Moon and the Capricorn Rising, so stay tuned. Now this series is an updated version of a series that I made back in 2017, so about 4 years ago on the channel. But within the space of 4 years, I would like to hope that my understanding of astrology has changed, and so therefore I hope I'm able to bring some new and interesting pieces of information to the table today. Now, I do recommend that you watch the entire video, even if you're here for your sun, your moon, or your rising. Watch the whole thing because things can interlink. But then also keep in mind that things may be subject to change depending upon your sun, moon and rising combinations. Now, this of course is my own analysis, but certainly feel free to add your thoughts and opinions in the comment section down below. I do appreciate your feedback. However, before we do dive into today's video, certainly make sure that you give this video a like if you like it. Also make sure to subscribe if you have not already, and to of course click that little bell icon so that you can keep yourself updated with further content from myself. And one more quick thing to mention, and that is that I have a merchandise store available, so if you're interested in picking up a piece of merchandise, then go to the link in the description box below. Okay. So with all of those introductions out of the way, let's do this. Right, so just to begin, let's give a brief overview of the sun, moon and rising within astrology. Now, these three placements are often referred to as your big three within the astrological community, and many people like to mention them as a way to express their very basic personality. Naturally, however, as most of us know here, astrology goes much deeper than these three components, but I still do recommend learning about these things, learning about these placements, especially if you are a beginner. But even if you're more advanced, then, well, I still recommend watching, because who knows, maybe you will learn something new. Okay, so to begin, let's look at the sun in Capricorn. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some keywords associated with the sun in astrology. Read those keywords, take them in. But what does it mean if these words are being combined with the sign or with the archetype of Capricorn? Well, it creates an energy of a practical, cautious and formal self-expression, as well as an energy of conscious discipline, responsibility and professionalism. Likewise, it creates an energy of one's individuality being based on achievement and reputation, along with an energy of taking pride in one's career. Plus, it also creates an energy of a structured creativity, so having structured creativity, as well as an energy of restricted love, celebration, and applause. But what does this specifically say about you if you were born under the sun sign, meaning that you have the sun in Capricorn natally? Well, it suggests that you are intrinsically aware of your responsibilities and your obligations. And you're also aware of the rules and regulations that confine you and keep you on track. So if there's a task that you've set out to complete, you will focus on it until the job is done, for example. Or if you're obliged or if you're obligated to do a chore around the house, your parents will keep you on track until you do it successfully, as another example. Perhaps you consider your parents to be quite strict, as they would continuously make the house rules very clear, and if you ever broke the rules or stepped out of line, you would be punished or you would be disciplined until you learned your lesson. So maybe your curfew was set in stone, or maybe you had a regular bedtime, or maybe not eating your dinner was instantly met with, well, no dessert for you. And I suppose this swiftly leads me onto the relationship that you may have had with your father or with a father figure within your life growing up. So perhaps you viewed this father influence, or you still view this father influence, as a stern or strict or demanding individual within your life. Maybe it was him who would make the rules, and maybe it was him who would discipline you or other family members if or when you or them broke his rules. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that this father figure was abusive or bad. Maybe his rules were actually what was best for your development. It could very well be that his structure helped structure you. And so thanks to his management, so to speak, you grew up to keep yourself in order. You learned to be respectful. You learned to be responsible. And in this respect, maybe you would come across as quite mature or as quite grown up as a child. Perhaps other parents would look at you and they would think to themselves, what a good child, due to how self-controlled you were, or due to you keeping yourself out of trouble, for example. And so as you grew older, you would recognize the many lessons that your father taught you. Perhaps you're a Capricorn sun individual and you're over 30 years old and you're watching this, and when you look back on your upbringing, you think, I'm so glad that my father kept me on the straight and narrow, because thanks to his guidance and thanks to his structure, I'm able to provide for myself today. Though on the other hand, perhaps there's times when you look back and you see depression, you see disparity, sadness, or maybe you recognize how much your father actually struggled, how much he worked his ass off to provide for you and your family, how much he carried the weight of his profession on his shoulders. Maybe for him it was a huge uphill battle in order for him to look after you and your family, or maybe this father figure would have difficulty expressing or showing emotion and affection. Then again, maybe in his eyes there's a time and there's a place for emotion. Or maybe he didn't want to show any weakness or vulnerability around you and your family, because for him it was like, well, it's a waste of time. What's the point? Because at the end of the day, crying about something isn't going to set food on the table. Showing annoyance or getting upset, these things aren't going to bring in a paycheck. Or maybe it was this whole idea of, I must remain strong for my family. I must be the backbone for this family. Therefore, maybe this father figure was all work. In fact, perhaps he was super stressed because of work. So therefore, perhaps some of you Capricorn sun individuals wouldn't see your father often, or maybe when you did see him, he was preoccupied with something else. Could very well be that he was aware of his responsibilities and obligations, which you in turn inherited such an awareness from him. Again though, maybe your father struggled with the likes of sadness or possibly even depression, and so you witnessed your father being distant and cold and often removed from the family environment. Maybe he wouldn't speak of his struggles. He would keep everything in. He would bottle everything up. Perhaps he even turned to unhealthy crutches as a way to numb his pain, as a way to cope with his inner world. And if such events did occur, well, perhaps you felt unloved by him. You felt rejected. You felt abandoned. And maybe you couldn't feel his kindness or his love or his affection. I mean, how could you if he was elsewhere, emotionally or physically? And to be blunt, perhaps some of you go on to resent your father later on in life for doing such a thing. And then maybe you feel cold towards him as you distance yourself gradually from him. And therefore, there's a possibility of you developing father or daddy issues, as it's referred to. So this I feel, what I'm about to say may apply more specifically to you Capricorn Sun females or to you more feminine types. So this idea of being rejected by your father resulting in you having trouble within your relationships. So maybe you find it difficult to trust others, or maybe you attract much older people, or maybe you have a real issue with authority or being told what to do, or perhaps you also engage in self-sabotage. But then for you Capricorn Sun males, or for more of you masculine types, well, perhaps you may also engage in these types of behaviors, but maybe also you lack focus, you lack ambition. Maybe you find it difficult to commit within your relationships, or maybe you're very distrusting and you're very skeptical of other people. Though ultimately, if you as a Capricorn Sun individual were rejected by your father, or if you were denied love from your father, maybe, quite possibly, you become anxious, you become tense and rigid and highly insecure. Maybe you constantly second guess yourself, or maybe you find it extremely difficult to recognize your accomplishments or your achievements. Perhaps you're flooded with self-doubt and low self-esteem whilst you grieve the loss of this father figure. And I'm not going to sugarcoat things here, because with the Sun in Capricorn, it can suggest a pretty challenging relationship with this father figure. And perhaps for some of you Capricorn Suns, this person was a slave driving punisher with a super critical view of the world in your eyes. Perhaps to you, it felt like you could do nothing right, as you were always being marked on your performance somehow. And so you may feel this immense pressure, or have felt this immense pressure, to be a somebody or to be successful in this father figure's eyes. And so in this respect, maybe some of you strive to make this father individual recognize you, whilst being severely stressed out and overworked in the process. But then on the other hand, for those of you who felt recognized, for those of you who were celebrated by this individual, by this father influence, and for those of you who didn't feel rejected, well, perhaps there's a great deal of respect between you and this father figure. Maybe you look at him as someone who parented you well, as he provided you with all the necessary adulting tools. He taught you about all of the basics, and he let you learn from your mistakes in a calm and cool and collected way, whilst also being stern when he needed to be. So as you can see from this information, things could have played out in many different ways, Capricorn Suns. But whatever the relationship or lack thereof, there seems to be a very strong link between this father-child relationship and how you structure yourself. So perhaps some of you were so overworked growing up that you become a workhorse later on in life. Or maybe some of you were given so much negative feedback of not being good enough, of not performing well enough, that you then have no career goals, because in your eyes, you're crap anyway, so why bother? Or maybe some of you never saw your father, and so you learned how to structure and discipline yourself whilst feeling a strong duty to your mother. Or maybe you were provided with tools for success, and so you grew up more sure of yourself. Perhaps it's a mixture of all of these things, or perhaps the relationship I've been describing is connected with your parents overall. But essentially, it's things like order and structure and rules and responsibility that are connected with your ego, with your individuality, and with your identity, Capricorn Suns. And no matter how much you think it sucks that it's you who's always having to own up to your crap, it's you who's always having to take responsibility and hold yourself accountable for things, what you may not realize is that all of that hard work, that will eventually pay off. But the key here is not to cave. The key here is not to admit defeat or to fall off track. So I want to explain this by painting a picture in your mind. So I want you to imagine a runner who is competing in a tournament. This runner is on their last lap, but they've already done 29 laps. They are feeling exhausted. They're sweating and they're hot, and all they want to do is stop and have some water. But yet, it's only one more lap, one final lap, and not only can they stop and rest, but maybe they'll win. Maybe they will have won this tournament, and even if they don't win, they will still be able to say, I completed that, I finished that. So I want you to think of this 29th lap as representative of your 29th year, as representative of a part of your Saturn return. And for those of you who don't know what a Saturn return is, it's a time when Saturn returns to its natal position in your chart. And astrologically speaking, it sort of marks a time when we truly become an adult. We go through many trials and tribulations during this time, but it's these things that are pushing us to overcome as we strive to succeed. Then by the time we come out of our Saturn return, so about 30 years old and onwards, we can then see what we have accomplished so far, and we can see what rewards we have due to our hard work and due to our diligence. And so bringing this back to you, Capricorn suns, throughout so much of your life, it might feel like an uphill battle. It might feel like you are competing in this very long race. It might feel like you take one step forward and then you take 2 steps back, as if you have such a long way to go, as if it's just one thing after the other, through failure after failure. And it might also feel like you're always having to go back to the drawing board, or you're having to always repeat the same things in order to learn. But as you grow and as you mature, well, things might start to ease for you. That load that you're carrying, it may feel lighter as you feel more secure within yourself. Perhaps you don't feel as stressed, or maybe you don't take life as seriously as you once did. Or maybe there's a new fine perspective. There's something that maybe happens within you, and then you see things in a whole different way. But the point is that as you age, I think you start to reap the rewards of success. However, like I said, don't fall off track. I mean, could you imagine if that runner just decided, nah, I'm done running at the 29th lap? They would have been so close to that win. And so in your case, this is like being so close to a major breakthrough, or so close to gaining a reward. Then again, of course, I do understand that in certain situations, the sensible thing to do is to walk away or to try something else. But that's not the same thing as giving up. And so essentially here, I think that there's power to be found in the long haul, and there's power to be found in patience and waiting things out. Now, also make sure here that you are looking towards your actual Saturn sign and Saturn house, because it's the placement of Saturn that will tell you about your Saturn return here, but it's still your sun being ruled by Saturn here, Capricorn suns. And anywhere Saturn is, maturity follows. Lessons also follow. Rewards follow. Just remember not to be foolish or irresponsible, because karma can hit you hard if you're not careful. Then again, perhaps these karmic lessons shape you and they turn you into a better quality person. And the reason why I bring up karma is because, well, Saturn rules over karma within astrology. Though on the other hand, perhaps for some of you, the hardships that you experience, they're much more challenging. They're too challenging. And so You become cold towards the world maybe, as you refuse to let anybody in, whilst also lacking any type of ambition. Though I don't think that's what you want. I think you Capricorn suns, you strive to be recognized as professionals within whatever field you work in. I think you want to be seen for your accomplishments and for your achievements, especially given that you've most likely worked extremely hard in the process. And I also think you want to get to a point where you take pride in your career, as you are well respected by your managers or your bosses or by members of the public. Though, to be fair, some of you might step over others in order to get there. You might be unforgiving, you might be stubborn, status seeking, as you believe that your way is the only correct way. And if this is you, maybe an ego check is in order, or maybe it's good to identify the reasons for why you seek power and social status, etc. Still, however, I think that a part of your purpose, Capricorn suns, is connected with that of being successful, whatever success means to you, of course. And I also think a part of your purpose is associated with becoming an expert, becoming qualified, becoming the well-respected professional. Though I also want to say here that in terms of success and being qualified and being well-respected, this doesn't just have to solely be towards a career. This could also be towards a family, it could be towards a relationship. And this is why I also said whatever success means to you. But essentially, I think that where your priorities lie in life, it's these priorities that you want to really build on and have a secure grasp on. And throughout that process, there's a lot of really harsh but rewarding lessons that you learn. Now, some astrologers do like to associate the ascendant/rising sign with our life path, and then the sun as representative of the person that we are striving to become. And so in your case, Capricorn suns, perhaps, as I say, you are striving to become this successful expert individual, this hardworking, diligent, accomplished individual who is respected with a dignified reputation. This professional who handles things carefully and practically, but at the same time, it's also achieving these things that come with obstacles and lessons and challenges and delays and mistakes and so on. Though the last thing that I want to talk about is your creativity, in that your creativity might be quite well structured. So you might set a plan in place when creating something, for example, or you might pencil in your hobbies and things that you like to do for fun, or you might organize your time according to any creative projects that you're working on, or you might possess a very serious attitude towards sports or towards certain leisure activities that you enjoy. In fact, you might turn your creativity into a profession or into a purpose of yours. Now, it might be that your creativity was blocked, especially during your younger years. Perhaps it was restricted in some way. But with practice and age, I think you grow to see the power of your individual creativity, even if you don't necessarily see yourself as a creative person. Not to mention, whatever you do create, well, it's most likely going to be excellent. No half-assed jobs here, because, well, your performance, it's most likely than not going to be top-notch. Though whatever you do create, there's something slow and methodical and long-lasting about the process. Now, before we do move on to the moon, make sure that you are locating the house placement of the sun, because this is going to show you the area of life that this energy is playing out in. And also remember aspects, because aspects could show you any difficulties that may arise, along with any other energies that may influence that sun energy. Okay, so moving on to the moon in Capricorn. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some keywords associated with the moon in astrology. Read those keywords, take them in, But what does it mean if these keywords are being combined with the sign or with the archetype of Capricorn? Well, it creates an energy of practical and conventional emotional reactions, as well as an energy of concerned yet cautious emotional support. Likewise, it creates an energy of instinctive responsibility and commitment, along with an energy of unconscious anxiety and professionalism. Plus, it creates an energy of a father-like protection, as well as an energy of good quality caregiving. But what does this specifically say about you if you were born under this moon sign, meaning that you have the moon in Capricorn natally? Well, it suggests that within your family home growing up, there was plenty of work to be done. There was plenty of responsibility and more than enough rules to follow. Likewise, perhaps there was more than enough hardship and restriction. So for example, maybe your parents worked quite a lot, or maybe there were limitations that always seemed to weigh on your family in some way, such as a lack of money or a lack of resources and materials. Perhaps you observed as your parents really pushed to ensure shelter or to ensure a substantial living situation for you and your family. Then again, perhaps for others of you, you were forced to work from a very young age. I mean, take today's society in the West, for example. We notice babies being on YouTube, kids being on YouTube, and these infants are essentially earning their parents a paycheck. Now, without getting into the morality of such a swift, progressive change, it's still an example of working from a very young age. Though perhaps your situation is different, such as you working as a child model or as a child actor, or maybe you worked on your family's farm growing up, or perhaps you were forced to do paper rounds for your family, or maybe you were encouraged to perform difficult and strenuous jobs around the house, or maybe your parents simply pushed on you to grow up pretty early on. But just focusing on the limitations and hardships, maybe you feel like you didn't get to be a child because of these things. This could have been a situation where one of your parents was severely sick, or maybe this could have been a situation where the family home environment was in an extremely difficult state. Maybe family members were cold or distant, or perhaps family members were separated, or maybe they lacked empathy and emotional understanding. Perhaps you saw family members struggling with legal battles or custody battles, or maybe the government got involved, the law got involved in family matters. So in this respect, perhaps members of authority had to step in and provide structure, provide order. Though another possibility is that you were separated from your father, or maybe you were separated from your mother, but whatever the case, separation might have come into play, resulting in a rift within the family dynamic, also resulting in a type of struggle or a difficulty. Now, these limitations and hardships don't necessarily mean that your childhood was all doom and gloom. In fact, your parents and your family might have seen you as an overachiever, or as someone who was ambitious and capable, as someone who could achieve your long-term goals. Maybe your parents could tell that you were full of potential, and so they really encouraged you to discipline yourself and set boundaries for yourself. And so, in a way, they saw you as someone who was going somewhere in life. And even if they didn't, even if your parents weren't the most supportive of your future goals, well, perhaps you discovered pretty early on that you had to be in charge of your own path. It's you who had to take control of your own destiny without depending on others to map things out for you. Now, when it comes to the relationship that you had with your mother or with a mother influence or a mother figure, well, this could have played out in many different ways. So for example, perhaps you feel that it was your responsibility to take care of your mother, or maybe your mother had so many responsibilities that you were forced to take responsibility of yourself. The one other possibility is that your mother placed some pretty high standards upon you growing up, and so you would automatically push yourself in order to live up to her standards. Or maybe your mother was a hardworking businesswoman or a career woman, and so she spent much of her time working. And so due to her time being elsewhere, you were looked after by nannies or by professional childminders. Or maybe your father was the primary caregiver who would care for you most of the time. Then again, this could have been a situation where both of your parents worked a lot. Perhaps they had to, or perhaps they both had a very powerful work ethic. They were both ambitious workaholics. And perhaps you picked up on this pretty early on, and so you go on to act in a similar fashion. You sort of inherited their thirst for career success, or you inherited their desire to gain a high quality reputation. However, the thing about living up to these high standards is that, well, maybe you find it very difficult to switch off, for example. Maybe into your adult years, you feel guilty for resting, or maybe you put yourself down anytime you fall short or you make a mistake. And you may also come across as quite judgmental and super critical towards others who don't work as hard as you do in your eyes, or towards others who don't perform tasks to the same standards as you. Also, you might get upset by people who don't take responsibility of their actions and their shortcomings, especially given that you were most likely punished for disobeying or for stepping out of line growing up yourself. Not to mention, there may be a part of you that is hungry for status and success and recognition, so much so that you become emotionally charged as you push to make things happen. Then again, perhaps you actually repress or you deny your emotions in the process. So if a certain emotion doesn't have a purpose, then it doesn't need to be felt, or it doesn't need to be dealt with. Or if an emotion doesn't have its place, then why give it your time or your energy? Or maybe there's some of you who find it challenging to know what type of emotion you're feeling, as if your emotions are limited. And if these emotional examples are the case for you, Capricorn moons, well, maybe you find it difficult to talk about your feelings, or maybe you don't open up to people easily, or maybe you prefer to find practical solutions when discussing other people's feelings, or quite possibly there's something more serious going on beneath the surface. However, another possibility is that you suffer from chronic self-doubt or feelings of inadequacy, so much so that you feel like an imposter, like a fraud, like a phony. So it's this whole attitude of, who am I to be successful, or who am I to achieve my long-term goals? And so you sabotage things. You turn everything positive and good into a negative, into a gloomy experience. It's as if you sometimes set yourself up for failure because of how much you feel like a failure. I suppose then, this is the difference between the Sun in Capricorn and the Moon in Capricorn. Yes, you Sun in Capricorn individuals, you may experience self-doubt, and you may also experience this type of imposter syndrome. But the Moon in Capricorn, individuals, you can feel these things. Your emotions are coming into play. And so when you feel this way, Capricorn moons, it can be quite the challenge to turn things around by saying, no, actually, I am successful and I am capable. Though I suppose our emotions, they are rational and they aren't necessarily based on logic and reason, but yet the thing about this is that you Capricorn moons, you may try to filter your emotions through reason and rationale. And so anytime your emotions don't feel within your control, it's like, damn it, I failed. I wasn't able to manage myself responsibly. Still though, during those times when you're ridden with negativity and doubt and feelings of failure, maybe it's a good idea to turn things around by asking yourself, am I being reasonable here? Is there any evidence to show that I'm worthless or useless? Or am I being hard on myself? Because something went wrong or because something happened that wasn't within my control. Though on the other hand, I also think that with maturity and with age and, well, self-awareness as well, you become more sure of yourself. Or when you gain some type of external success, perhaps you feel more successful within. However, an important thing to mention here is just to be careful not to depend on the outside successes and the outside world as a way to feel emotionally satisfied. Same goes for you Capricorn suns, because you might look to outside success as a way to fuel your ego and build confidence. But in your case, Capricorn moons, this is an emotional thing, and it's also a very sensitive part of you. So in this respect, you might take setbacks very personally, or you might crawl under a rock the moment you receive any criticism, or you might let your inner fears hold you back from making something happen. Again, like I said, with things like maturity, growth, self-awareness, and doing the inner work, to be quite frank, I think you grow to be someone who is well established, someone who sees your potential and what you're capable of achieving. Sure, your parents might have seen your potential, but I think one of the lessons that you're coming to learn is how to see your potential from within, how to structure and build yourself from the inside. And throughout the process, I think you are greeted with a few harsh truths that may be difficult to address, but by looking at them, you learn so much about your ability to step up and be responsible. So this could be within your career, within your professional life, but as I was sort of saying with Capricorn suns, can also be within your family life or within a certain relationship. Or this stepping up could be associated with your health or with your wellness, but wherever you're called to step up, this is an internal process. It's happening within. Now, when it comes to how you show emotional support and care towards others, you're probably quite practical and strategic. So you might provide a practical piece of advice or a practical solution if you notice a friend or a spouse is going through something, for example. Or you might create a plan for a loved one who needs help. Or you might be really, really good at helping others in a direct and straightforward way. No sugarcoating things, no pussyfooting around a situation, because it's you that's like, let's address this before it builds, possibly leading to more implications later on, possibly leading to more problems and long-term effects later on. And so in this way, you're probably great at giving other people tough love. And I think your loved ones appreciate this about you at times, but other times, maybe not so much. In fact, I think you're also quite good at identifying a problem quite early on to ensure that it doesn't get out of control. You can be quite the organizer and the master builder in this respect. You are great at handling situations in a practical, hands-on way. However, something to consider about this is just to be careful not to push on others or to control others emotionally, Capricorn moons. Though on the flip side of this, I think you appreciate it when others support you emotionally in a respectful manner. So maybe you simply can't stand for disrespect or for dishonesty from your loved ones, for example. Or maybe you're less likely to accept emotional support from people who you do not respect. And likewise, I think you appreciate it when your loved ones are upfront and they're direct with you, even though you might take criticism and negative feedback quite personally. Though the last thing that I want to address is to do with your emotional needs. And perhaps what you need emotionally is to be successful, or, well, to feel successful, to feel like you have some type of control of your life, or to feel like you can take care of your responsibilities and your obligations. And I also think that you need rules and structure in order to feel emotionally satisfied and emotionally secure. So times whenever it feels like anarchy or chaos, Perhaps you can't handle these things very well. Then again, maybe it's you who jumps into action as you set a plan in place so that order can be restored, so that it can be established once again. Or times when your responsibilities pile up and become overwhelming. Well, perhaps you go into overdrive whilst you keep doing and doing and doing. However, in this situation, perhaps it's beneficial to step back and assess your priorities. Still, I think you feel more emotionally secure when you have things in order, when there's a structure to things. But at the same time, I also think a bit of chaos can do you the world of good as well, Capricorn moons. Likewise, this can also apply to you Capricorn risings and Capricorn suns. And perhaps as you age, maybe you let loose. Maybe more specifically, you let loose around about after your Saturn return. Maybe around this time you realize that life is too short to be worrying all the time about success and achievement and being known as a somebody, or maybe life is too short to be worrying all the time in general. Or quite possibly you realize that life is too short to be working all the time whilst making little time for family and loved ones. Or maybe you reach a stage in your life where you're done with constantly doing, and so you become open to other possibilities. You become open to this idea of just existing. Though on the other hand, perhaps for some of you, you realize that you haven't made enough effort, or you haven't prioritized your time as effectively as you thought. Maybe a certain path you were on is no longer for you, and then you change your path. Though whatever way this plays out for you Capricorn moons, and also for you Capricorn suns and risings, I think your Saturn return comes with a lot of lessons. Though just specifically for you Capricorn moons, this Saturn return comes with a lot of lessons surrounding your emotional needs and your emotional security. Though still, make sure you are looking towards that Saturn placement, so looking at the sign that Saturn is in and the house that Saturn is in for more information on your Saturn return. Still, however, when it comes to these Capricorn placements, there is this emphasis on maturity, responsibility, and age. Now, before we do move on to the rising sign / the ascendant, make sure that you are locating the house placement of the moon, because this is going to show you the area of life that this energy is playing out in. But then also remember aspects, because aspects can show you any difficulties that may arise, along with any other energies that may influence that moon energy. Okay, so lastly then, let's look at the Capricorn rising / the Capricorn ascendant. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some keywords associated with the rising / the ascendant within astrology. Read those keywords, take them in. But what does it mean if these keywords are being combined with the sign or with the archetype of Capricorn? Well, it creates an energy of structured and mature facial features, as well as an energy of realistic yet restrictive energy levels. Also, it creates an energy of a disciplined, calculative, and organized life path, along with an energy of practical body movements and directions. Plus, it creates an energy of a business-oriented self-identity, as well as an energy of a responsible and respected appearance. But what does this specifically say about you if you were born under this rising sign / ascendant, meaning that you have the rising or ascendant in the sign of Capricorn natally? Well, it suggests that you see the world through a lens of accomplishment, recognition, and success. But you also see it through a lens of hardship, limitation, and obstacles. So you might be very hardworking and determined when it comes to your professional life, or when it comes to your studies, for example. Or you might look out into the distant future as you think about all the things you would like to achieve. Or maybe you're the type of person who runs through a plan before taking action, and perhaps a part of the reason for why you do this is because you want to make sure that your time and energy is being well spent. And so in this respect, maybe you're someone who truly values your time and your energy. And so therefore you act wisely when entering into new situations, for example, or you choose your friends and your social connections wisely, or maybe you prefer to take calculative risks rather than jumping into things head first. The following on from this point, you're typically someone who moves gradually and cautiously. No sudden or sharp movements that catch others by surprise. In fact, you might have grown up in an environment where things like structure and order were encouraged and reinforced. So maybe you were an obedient child, for example, or perhaps you learned early on what would happen if you broke the rules, or maybe you were brought up following tradition and specific values to abide by. Or perhaps you were surrounded by elders and older family members who taught you how to manage yourself, who taught you how to organize yourself. Maybe they showed you how things worked or how to perform certain tasks. Maybe they guided you by urging you to follow rules. Or maybe you learned about respect from your elders. Or perhaps there was an elder who you were quite close with specifically. This could have been a grandmother or a grandfather or an auntie or an uncle or your mother, your father, whoever though. Maybe you have fond memories of this person or of these people, or maybe you miss them dearly when they pass. And so in this respect, we're noticing a deep connection with someone who played a significant role in your life growing up. Then again, this could have been a teacher or a mentor or a member of authority who tried their best to teach you right from wrong. Though on the other hand, this could be a situation where you experienced a relationship blockage with an elder or with a parent, etc. Maybe they were difficult to reach, or maybe you felt like you couldn't connect emotionally, or maybe they worked a lot, or maybe you clashed in opinion over tradition and family values, etc. And if this was or is the case for you Capricorn risings, maybe you experience feelings of regret or shame or sadness. Perhaps it was heartbreaking to go from being connected with a loved one due to following customs and rules to then being disconnected from them due to you thinking for yourself or due to their time being needed elsewhere. Though following on from this point, perhaps this is something associated with the father figure in particular. Perhaps he was or is a hardworking individual, a stern person, no BS type of person, someone who gets to the point and doesn't have time for pettiness or drama or unnecessary emotional baggage. Maybe he has or had a set way of doing things. But when it comes to emotional things and getting into feelings, he's not the most receptive. And so times when you challenged his authority, for example, it was like, boom, shut down. Or times whenever you questioned his rules, you were told, no talking back. Or times whenever you got into trouble or did anything reckless or stupid in his eyes, he would steer you in the right direction again. Perhaps some of you Capricorn risings, you respect your father for his structure because he helped structure you. You recognize him as a stable force within your life. Or maybe others of you agree to disagree with him. So you grow to slowly distance yourself from him because you don't see the value in his ways. Heck, maybe for some of you, your father was absent, and so you grew up without a father influence within your life. Then again, maybe some of you grew up with a stepfather, so your biological father left, and then a different father influence came into your life. Still, however, maybe there's an element here of you learning to parent yourself from pretty early on. So maybe some of you moved out of your family home as soon as you could. Or maybe some of you acted as a parent within your family home, or maybe there's those of you who followed the rules gladly because you understood them and you appreciated them. So as you can see here, it can play out in many different ways. But then again, this could have played out where your parents worked, resulting in you having to provide for yourself. Maybe they were in the military, or they worked even within the government, or maybe they were a part of the police force. And so due to such time-consuming professions, you as the child were left to get your act together pretty damn fast. So for example, maybe you got your own house at 16, or maybe you got a job pretty early on than most of your peers, or maybe you were paying bills before most of your friends. Basically, it's you Capricorn risings who grow up fast. And so you're typically people who are wise beyond your years. You act as these old souls who have seen it all before. And you also learn early on the importance of things like money and work and time and responsibilities. Though I'm not going to sugarcoat things here, you might have experienced immense hardship throughout the process. I mean, I'm sure it's not easy having to grow up as a child or as a teenager and then looking at all of your friends partying whilst you're working, or seeing your friends going on holidays whilst you're counting the pennies in order to pay your bills. So on the other hand, maybe you naturally grow to accept your limitations and your responsibilities. Maybe you learn to accept that your life is different and that your priorities aren't the same as somebody else who is the same age as you. Still though, I wonder what is happening on an emotional level. How do you cope with all of the financial insecurity pressures, for example? How do you manage your emotions and your feelings? See, here's the thing. I think you can have this get up and get on with it type of attitude towards life. Remind you of anyone? Or when you are faced with a difficult challenge or an obstacle, you're so good at overcoming it. You're so good at facing it head on. But when difficult emotions arise, it's like, what are these? These things that are confusing me and getting in the way. They're blocking me from getting on with things. And so quite possibly, some of you deny your emotions, or you put them to the side until a later stage, or until a more useful time, more practical time. Perhaps your emotions can feel quite removed from you at times because you weren't necessarily raised to accept your emotions as your own. And perhaps you attract partners or friends or lovers who are more emotional, who are more sensitive. These individuals who are much more in touch with their feelings, but at the same time, it's these people who might annoy you because of how they lack this problem-solving attitude towards their emotions and feelings. Maybe you just don't understand their way of handling things, but yet it's also you Capricorn risings, I think, who are crying out for emotional support. You're crying out for emotional care. Maybe this is something that you're not aware of, but just perhaps you seek relationships that get you into your feelings a bit more. But then just as much, it's you who brings structure. It's you who brings that order to the relationship. Which, by the way, I'm not saying that you are not emotional people. It's more so to do with how you address your emotions, how you handle them. And so by sitting with them or by recognizing your emotional patterns, perhaps you feel more grounded, you feel more centered, because you're allowing your emotions to move through you rather than them feeling trapped within you, rather than possibly suppressing them also, which in turn may lead to all types of psychological and or health implications. Now, some astrologers do associate the sun sign with the person that we are striving to become, and then the ascendant / the rising in association with our life path. So make sure to locate the position of the sun in your chart for more information. But in the case of your life path, Capricorn risings, perhaps a part of your life path is about finding your purpose. It's about finding where you fit in, but it's also about finding where you stand out. And it's about finding that particular profession that you're really aiming for, that you want to pursue. Or maybe it's about setting up long-lasting structures, such as building a home or building a family or building on a relationship. Though whatever it is, it's to be timeless and most likely it's to be permanent, something that isn't likely to fall apart easily or change suddenly. And so you'll really take your time as you work up a career ladder, for example, or you'll be extra cautious as you enter into a marriage, or you'll make sure that you've covered all the groundwork before you get a dog or before you decide to have a child. But as you grow, as you mature, I think you also discover that change and surprise can be valuable, can be worthwhile. I think that along your journey, you discover that what is successful to you is subject to change. What you grow to learn is a good thing. And I also think that you're greeted with your willingness to break the rules sometimes, whilst having no shame in doing so. You sort of age and mature into an individual who doesn't take life as seriously as you once did, into someone who doesn't care as much, or who's okay with marching to the beat of your own drum. Perhaps such realizations, they don't come by choice, or they don't come politely or in a gentle manner. Maybe you're forced to break out, or maybe a sudden change reshapes the entire system, or maybe you evolve past all traditions and customs. Still, however, it's you Capricorn risings who grow to see yourselves in a different light, I think. Though when it comes to finding your purpose and setting up these long-lasting structures, make sure that you are locating Saturn within your chart. And the thing about this is that Saturn is your chart ruler, and this Saturn energy, the chart ruler, will give you more information on things like success and your professional life, along with any obstacles and limitations and hardships within your life. Though also consider the other 11 houses within your chart. Likewise, make sure you are especially considering your midheaven / your 10th house position. Though speaking of this area of life, perhaps a part of your purpose is associated with fairness and sincerity and justice. And perhaps also you strive to be liked and valued by the public or by members of authority, especially for your accomplishments and your achievements, which you work very, very hard at. Yeah, you're probably someone who is very much aware of how you appear and how you present yourself to the world. And I think that you wish to be respected and recognized for the effort that you put in. And when it comes to your facial features and your physical appearance, well, these things are also going to showcase your high quality standards and your maturity. Though one more thing here before I move on to the last point is just remember your Saturn return, okay? Make sure that you are locating the sign that Saturn is in, along with the house placement of Saturn. And then also keep in mind, like I said, Saturn is your chart ruler. So really, your Saturn return and that Saturn energy is going to play a huge importance within your life, Capricorn risings. Now, the last thing that I want to mention is to do with your energy levels and how your energy levels may be quite restrictive, but realistic. It could be a scenario where you are restricted by some sort of health issue, or maybe you burn out very quickly, and so you prefer to take your time, you take on the day very slowly and gradually, or maybe you strategize things pretty well in an order that's more practical, in an order that is more realistic, rather than getting too far ahead of yourself only to set yourself up for failure. Perhaps in your eyes, slow and steady wins the race, Capricorn risings. And quite honestly, you would much rather do an excellent job taking your time over doing a mediocre job whilst rushing ahead. Though when it does come to your energy levels, make sure you are locating the placement of Mars within your chart, because Mars does rule over things like our energy levels and our drive and our motivation within astrology. So the placement of Mars, it may tell a different story to what I am saying, but then it could actually add to the story. Okay then, Cosmic Warriors, so that concludes my really long video all about the differences between the Capricorn Sun, the Capricorn Moon, and the Capricorn Rising. Now, if you do happen to have any thoughts and opinions on today's video, then certainly let us know what you thought in the comment section down below. I do appreciate your feedback. But with all that being said, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for subscribing. And of course, if you would like to see more videos from myself and you have not yet subscribed, then make sure that you click that subscribe button, and also make sure that you give this video a like, remember. And I will be back with another video very, very soon. Bye!